Now, I will start the meeting in the traditional way by ringing, in this case, a bell, rather than the bell. I just thought it was a slight change. So welcome everybody to St. David's Day. We only get this opportunity once in about 7 years of holding an event on a Saint Day. We've already had St. Andrew's on the 30th of November, and now we are celebrating St. David. And I'd like particularly to thank everybody who's joined us, who actually has previously celebrated St. David's Day, and perhaps even visited the London Welsh Centre. So welcome everybody. I see many faces who are visiting for the first time, but do we have any Rotarians visiting for the first time?
If you are a Rotarian visiting for the first time, can you just wave at me, please, and unmute yourself and introduce yourself? I don't see anybody on my first screen. I'm now going to look at the other one. Any Rotarians visiting for the first time? I don't see anybody presently.
Okay. I was expecting one or two, but perhaps they'll turn up shortly. Right. So let us move into the meeting proper. I'd like to mention visits to other clubs, and I'm pleased that Chicago has visited the Chicago Club and also the Italy Club. We have myself and Hugh have been to Colombo this week, and we have members who actually celebrated the birthday of the first club in the world on the 23rd of February, who attended a party hosted involving District and our great friend Eve Conway. Those are the visits.
Mr. President, you and I also visited the Manchester Club, where you spoke very eloquently about the history of the London Club with slides and everything. It was very impressive, and we were able to have a chat with them about the 1911 clubs. And in addition, I also attended a meeting of Rotary on Stamps, which has gathered people from all around the world to discuss that subject. So.
Thank you, Vice President Dean, for reminding me of that. Okay, is Baji?
I attended a meeting of the Rotary Club of Lahore in Pakistan, and also in connection jointly with Madurai West in India. The main reason for the meeting was President Tony Sharma talked about the Indus Park Peace Project, and I had invited Lord Rami Ranger CBE to attend, which he kindly did. And as you know, we're trying to get Lord Ranger to be a patron of this project, which hopefully we will do shortly.
Thank you very much indeed, Rajiv, and we're particularly pleased that our member Marias is working night and day on that Indus Peace Park project. Thank you.
David, I've just linked in. Have you mentioned about a visit to Colombo last Tuesday?
Yes, indeed, you.
Yeah. You just linked in, so I didn't know whether you had mentioned that or not.
I did mention we'd visited you. I didn't elaborate on it because we have a few things to hopefully get through before 1300 hours. Birthdays. Helen Lutz. Is Helen Lutz on the call? No. In that case, Helen will have to wait for her birthday gift.
She doesn't have email.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Moving on, I have one District Council notice to give, and that is that there will be a special meeting of the District Council on the 16th of March to consider the restructuring that is proposed for Rotary in Great Britain and Ireland, their head office arrangements, and we will be encouraging discussion on that later. So with no more formal business, I would now like to give our first toast of the lunch to the Queen. considering also the health of Prince Philip. To the Queen. I now want to ask Clive if he will share the screen with me.
I fixed it, David, so that anybody can share screen. So you can share screen.
Okay, thanks. So I will coping with technology.
I'll try now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to share the screen. Do you want to help me?
Yes.
Have I shared the screen? No.
Yes, yes, the Olive Jenkins bursary, it says on mine.
Okay, thanks. So I now need to slideshow that. Right. So I really want to explain how there happens to be an Olive Jenkins bursary. It was an unplanned consequence of a chain of events. And it started 10 years ago when I was trying to organise a St David's Day event, including harp, at the London Well Centre, which Hugh Edwards is the president. So I needed a harp, and I found one in the club. It happened to be in a cupboard in room A, which was a very small area. So I found a harp, and I then needed to find a harpist, and I found one, it happened to be German, in Islington. But when I put them together, I found that the soundboard was cracked, and it was useless. It would take thousands of pounds to fix. So I placed it as an ornament in the London Well Centre's great Tudor hall-styled bar, where a visitor, Mark Jones, who is a sculptor, between drinks, saw it and said, "I fancy fixing that." Mark is on the left in the picture on my left anyway of the screen, and he's actually got the harp that he's been working on. And there's some details of the work he'd been doing on the harp. You can see that he'd been gilding it, he'd repaired the sounding board, and he'd been fixing the adjustments, and he'd been fixing the pedals. You'll notice there are 7 metal bars there. Each one is a harp pedal. So it's quite a sophisticated machine, really, to repair, but make into a beautiful piece of work. Repairing the harp is only the first stage. It has to be strung. Stringing a harp is also a specialist function because you're putting perhaps 4 tons of stress on the various parts of the harp. And Alan Harbour, in his workshop in Twickenham, took that on that task and repaired the harp. The harp actually was made by Erards of Great Marlborough Street. They'd been there since about 1796. And it was one of a batch of 6 made from American Beach that they received in 1851. First owner was a chap called John Major from Cheltenham Ladies College, we think. And it was repaired for John Major in 1861, but then we've rather lost track of it until it was donated to the London Well Centre in the 1950s. May have been played by a famous Welsh harpist called Ocean Ellis, but it was certainly used for lessons at the centre. Now it's had another collapse, and it is perhaps worth £2,000 as an ornament. But there was no home at the Welsh Centre for it, so I approached both Guildhall School of Music and the Royal Academy of Music, where Karen Vaughan, the head of harp, agreed to place it in the care of the Royal Academy and give it to a student to practice on. So I offered a bursary to a Welsh student harpist to look after it. And that was offered in 2012. The first recipient was in 2013. It's called the Olive Jenkins bursary because that was my mother, and it would have been the 100th anniversary of her birth in 2012. After 1 year, the first student harp collapsed due to stress. 160-year-old fish glue and 4 tons of stress didn't work together. And now the harp is resting once again in Alan Harper's workshop, waiting for something to be done about it. Anna, the current bursary holder, is graciously playing for us today. And the first bursary holder was, in fact, a lady called Anne Denholm, who was an outstanding musician at the Royal Academy of Music, and in fact was harpist to Prince Charles from 2015 to 2019. The current bursary holder is Anna Phillips, and she is in the third year of her Bachelor of Music at RAM, but she's playing to us today from her Pembrokeshire home in Clunderwen. So that's the introduction for you, Anna, and perhaps you would take it from us from now.
Thank you very much, David. Can everyone hear me okay? Hope so. Great.
I can certainly hear you fine.
Thank you, Anna. Can you stop sharing your screen, please, David?
Yeah, sorry.
Everybody can see your emails.
Sorry. I'm clicking around the screen trying to find it.
It's all right.
Sorry, I've done it now. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, I took you out.
Okay, I just about got there. Thank you.
Prynhawn da people very happy. Good afternoon and happy St. David's Day. I would just like to thank David for inviting me to play. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. So yes, as David said, I'm in my third year at the Royal Academy of Music, but I started learning on a very small Celtic harp in Welsh at the age of 10 at my local primary school. And yes, so the Celtic harp is much smaller than this concert pedal harp. It has about 34 strings, whereas this one has 47. So by the age of 10, I had already established a keen interest in music, as I had started learning the piano and the violin a couple of years beforehand. I carried on with these instruments and had achieved grade 8 in both of those by the time I was 16. And there was actually a period of time at school where I was doing a grade 8 exam every year for 3 years while I was doing my GCSEs and A-levels. So learning the harp happened quite by chance through school, because my local primary school bought these 2 little Celtic harps. And we started by having lessons in groups, and we were given a slot of 10 minutes a week in groups to practice. And now that seems crazy to me, because 10 minutes a day is barely a warm-up for me now. Anyway, fast forward a few years, I was very fortunate to continue having lessons in Welsh with the same teacher when I moved to secondary school. And then I met Claire Jones, who was the former royal harpist to the Prince of Wales. And that happened quite by chance as well. I had signed up to do one of her harp courses, but was unable to attend in the end. So she very kindly offered to give me a lesson. And after that, I remember feeling so inspired, and I remember coming out of that lesson and I thought, goodness, this is what I want to do with my career. And actually it's quite funny, because at the time, Claire was living in London and I was in Pembrokeshire, but now I'm based in London and she actually lives just down the road from me in Pembrokeshire. So I'd like to start by playing a Welsh piece called Farwell y Telenor yw Enedol Gwlad by John Thomas, which means the minstrel's adieu to his native land. John Thomas collaborated with the poet John Jones, who went by the poet name of Talieharn, on collating a series of books called Welsh Melodies with Welsh and English Poetry. So this is the poem that Talieharn wrote at the beginning of the piece. Mynd yr wyf o fy ngwlad, lle mae fanwyl mam a thad, gwai I mi ddod y dydd, dagrau dreiglant dros fy ngrydd, ysgwyd llaw, braw i'n bron, adal hen gymdeithion llon, Alien Don Delyn Boyne, Chweded Hiraeth yn fy ngwyn. And it translates as, I'm leaving my country where my beloved parents live. Oh, woe the day is taking place. Tears of love roll down my face. Shaking hands, truly disconcerted for having left my homeland, companions contented. The gentle harp, a song-like melody, articulates the longing in my misery. So this is a set of theme and variations, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm just going to change my microphone so that David, please, would you be able to mute yourself? Because I think there's quite a lot of background noise.
Yeah, well, I think everybody will mute themselves. I will certainly mute myself. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
As soon as I can.
Anna, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted.
You started, but then it muted.
That's very strange. Right, let's try that again.
You're unmuted now.
Okay, great. you very much. I'm going to pass over to David now.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. We look forward to hearing more from you shortly. But we have, we're very honoured to have Professor Mohamed Hopwood with us today. She is probably, well, I don't want to oversell her importance, but she is probably the best known of our Welsh language promoters. And language promoters in Wales. And we're so very pleased to have her with us. She's also, more importantly, in many ways, a bard. She was the first lady to be actually installed in a bardic, in the National Eisteddfod Bardic Chair. And we have somebody on the screen, Rita, who tells me that the chair that she received when she was, to everybody's great surprise, as the First Lady placed it in it, was first seen by Rita at the London Welsh Centre. It was made not far from London, and it was different to the normal bardic chairs because it wasn't as chunky as those that are often sat in by some of her male predecessors. And when she came to be installed in it, I'm assured, it fitted her like the proverbial glass slipper. And I'm sure that that probably is how I would like to think of Professor Hopwood fitting into our Welsh language scene. But she is going to talk to us today about Dewi Sant. Dr. Hopwood, if you'd be so kind as to tell us about Dewi Sant.
Diolch yn fawr iawn am y croeso, a dyna hyfryd oedd cael clywed y delyn yna. What a lovely way to join you with that beautiful sound, hyfryd iawn. Yes, well, I think I will try to share some slides if I can. Oh, it's telling me that, that I'm not enabled. I wonder if the host could give me permission just to share a few.
Yes, you can share.
I can. Oh, dyna ni. Diolch yn fawr iawn. So let's see, what have I got here? I thought I'd make you, I'm not sure how many people on the call are from Wales, but I thought I would just, let me see now, where does this home? Oh, there's always some hassle. Slideshow, there we are. So Dydd Gwyl Dewi. And I'm going to just remind you of Wales for a few minutes, because of course nobody can go anywhere, but we can just imagine. Dewi is how we call David in Welsh. Dewi comes from Dafydd. Any linguists here will recognize that the sound w is very closely belongs to v. So Dafydd, Dewi. We can see this very clearly in the names of rivers. So for example, running through Carmarthen, we have Afon Tywi in Cardiff, Afon Taf in Swansea, Afon Tawe in Cardigan, Tavy, and even in your London, you have Afon Tafwys. The Thames, of course, these are all ancient Celtic names, probably for some kind of goddess or other. We're not entirely sure, but it is essentially the same word. Tywi, Taf, Tavy, Tafwys, Thames, Thameses. You'll see these letters, how they slip from one to the other, showing us that essentially these languages all belong together. A good one when you're thinking about us here, the Celtic languages, is the link between the p and the k sound. So you all know about MacDonald's, or Mac is the Scottish Gaelic for sun, but then in Welsh it's mab, so the k becomes ma. But we're not here to talk about language. Now really I should be here today. This is where I'm supposed to be teaching, but since coming to the chair in Aberystwyth on the 1st of January this year, I haven't been there because we're not allowed. All the teaching happens over Zoom or Teams, but this is the old college in Aberystwyth. This is on the western side of Wales, and if we followed the sea south, we would get to St David's. So this is where I am this morning. I wonder if anybody in this group knows Carmarthen. It was a very still morning. The tide in Llansteffan was in, which makes the river tywy, very full, very calm. The moon here has been particularly strong, as it is in London, I'm quite sure. And this is where my family is from. So now we've arrived in Pembrokeshire. Anna will be delighted to see this. This is Strumblehead Lighthouse, next stop Ireland, and it is across the channel here that the boat still goes, as in Dewi's day the coracle did, no doubt. There it is. So, of course, the question is, who was Dewi? Dewi Sant. Well, he died probably in the year 601. That's what most sources agree on. And on the 1st of March, and that's why we keep his honour, his memory today. Some claim that this date was added later by Pope Callistus and the second in 1120, but with already 9th century manuscripts reference to the 1st of March being St. David's Day. By the way, it is Callistus who did say that going to St. David's twice is as good as going to Rome once. I think I'd even swap that. I think going to St. David's once will keep us all very, very safe indeed. But if only we could go there. When was he born? Well, we don't know, but some sources claim that he lived to be 127 years old. I'm not sure at all if that's true, but most information about him we get from the Vitae, from the Biched, recorded by Rhygyfarch. In general, the lives of the saints are rather dull books. The reading isn't entirely inspiring, but Dewi's is different. There is something quite alive about the chronicles of his life. And what's special about Dewi, I should say this in passing, is unlike the other patron saints of the nations of Britain, he's the only one from the country. We believe that St. Patrick's, he was either a Welshman or Scots, but he wasn't Irish. And you know as well as I do that St. George and St. Andrew, neither is from nor England nor Scotland. But an early poem, Armes Prydain, in the 10th century, describes Dewi not only as a saint, but as a leader. And already then we have a banner, a black background with a yellow cross, and this tradition of the leek. Now the Welsh word for leek is cennin, and the Welsh word for daffodil is cennin Peder, Peter's leek. So there is an association between those two flowers. And I think that it was around the time of Lloyd George that we started wearing daffodils, perhaps more than leeks. They are rather less smelly. We have to be honest. But tradition goes that the Welsh soldiers wore leeks in their caps on battlefields so that they could recognize one another and stand out from the others that they were fighting. And indeed, the leek was worn in Crécy and in Agincourt back in the battles in France in the 100-year wars. Well, what about Dewi? He lived a very simple, plain life. Dewi ddyfrwr. He drank water. It struck me as very strange that on St. David's Day, Penderyn launched their whiskey to Dewi Sant of all people. And he's associated with miracles as well. Famous one that he gave sight back to his teacher, Paulinus, and that one day in Llanddewi Brefi, where he stood to give a sermon, there were so many people there, he put a handkerchief on the ground and a mound appeared so that everybody could see him. There are hundreds of churches and places named after him, not only in Wales, but also in Brittany and in Cornwall. And maybe you know already that the word Llan, you see so often in Welsh place names, indicates that there is a church there. Llan, the place of a saint, of a holy man. And there are many Llanddewi's in Wales. Well, what else can I tell you? Yes, we've talked about the leeks, and that comes up in Shakespeare. I think I've told you that. But what I would like just to dwell on today, as Rotarians, I think you'd be possibly familiar already with that poet there that you see, I hope, on the screen, Waldo Williams. From Pembrokeshire, as was Dewi Sant. Much loved poet in Wales, much loved and translated by Rowan Williams too. And he came from this area, the Preseli Mountains. Anna, I hope I'm not making you too homesick there. And he was a well-known lover of peace. And we have two words for peace in Welsh, heddwch and tangnefedd. They're not, that last one is not easily translated, but it is something like the peace made. Tangnefedd is a peace made, and it always occurs between two things. So it can be between you and somebody else. It can be between you and the great being, a bod mawr, as my grandmother used to call the god, or it can be between you and yourself, the body and the soul, tangnefedd. And perhaps on this day, it's appropriate that I draw attention to the fact that in Wales we have at last a Peace Academy inspired by people like Dewi Sant and by people like Waldo Williams. When you think about Waldo Williams' father giving him these instructions when he left primary school to go to the big school in Narbeth, you'll see kind of the measure of the man, if you like. Just 4 instructions his father gave him from a booklet of them. Some of them were quite hilarious, reminding him that he should always sleep with his mouth closed. But others, like these, I think are worth dwelling upon. Think for yourself and not depend too much on hearsay. Make a stand for fair play to all, friends or few, or foes, many or few. Distinguish between the rule of the majority and the tyranny of the majority, and give the absent, the weak, and the unpopular a fair chance. Well, as I said, we have established an Academy Heddwch in Wales, a Peace Academy in Wales. We're delighted that we are now joining so many other nations across the world to have a Peace Institute. We're hoping that this will extend the peacemaking heritage of Wales, coordinating and developing a community of researchers. All the universities in Wales have signed up to it, and that we will find that Wales can make an internationally recognised contribution to peace. A focus on peace is seen in relevant policies, and that there is a strong public engagement with peace research and practice in Wales. So why is that appropriate for today? Well, Dewi Sant's most famous words are his last words that we always remember on this day. Here they are. Arglwyddi, frodyr a chwiorydd, byddwch lawen a chedwch eich ffydd a'ch cred, a gwnewch y pethau bychain, a welsoch ac a glywsoch gen I fi. We normally hone in on y pethau bychain, the little things. He tells us to do the little things that we heard and saw from him. But I would like to draw your attention to 3 other words. Frodyr a chwiorydd, brothers and sisters. Even then, in Wales, I'm pleased to say that women were not in any way regarded as inferior. Dewi Sant have us there in that phrase, brodyr a chwiorydd. And I somehow think that if we could only learn that from today, to recognise one another, no matter where we are in the world, as brothers and sisters, that would be a huge, significant thing for us to manage to do. Waldo Williams taught us that underneath all the branches, there is a common root. We are friends, of course, brothers and sisters, and that other phrase, be joyful, byddwch lawen. Dewi may well have lived a simple life, a hard-working and devout life, but he recognized the importance of being joyful. And in these lockdown days, brothers and sisters, what can be more important than to try our very best to be joyful? Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Professor Hopwood. I'd now like to ask Haridian to respond. Haridian, would you please?
Mererid, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi. That was absolutely wonderful. As a keen Welsh rugby fan, I didn't believe that this weekend could get any better after that wonderful victory in Cardiff on Saturday over the English. But I can say that we are so privileged to have you. What I am, however, is envious of all those Aberystwyth students, even if they can only have you online for the moment. I think you speak with authority, you speak with clarity, and you speak with fluency. All wonderful virtues, which I'm sure Dewi Sant himself would have embraced enthusiastically. So thank you so much. And on behalf of all of my colleagues, I'd invite them to join with me in thanking you in the usual manner, and also raise a glass to Dewi Sant, our own saint, who's such a virtuous lesson and teacher to us all. Thank you.
Dewi Sant.
Thank you very much indeed, again. And I have the pleasure of presenting you with, it will be digital, but it is our speaker certificate. And I hope that if you'll receive it in good condition before too long. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. We really do appreciate it. I know you have a very busy day. You are between media engagements at the moment, and I'm looking forward to hearing you at the Wales in London event this evening. So thank you so much for taking your time out today to be with us. We really do appreciate it.
Diolch am y gwahoddiad. Mwynhewch gweddill y diwrnod. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye. I now like to return to Anna for her next piece. Anna, would you like to introduce your next piece?
Yes. So you can hear me okay? Good. So
yep.
Next I will be playing the fourth movement from Benjamin Britten's Suite for Harp. Now I know you'll probably be thinking, but Britten is definitely not Welsh, and you're not wrong. But Britten wrote this only work for solo harp. It's actually dedicated to Osian Ellis, who David mentioned earlier. And when the Welsh harpist Osian Ellis played the harp part in Britten's Ceremony of Carols in 1959, he didn't realise that the composer was in attendance. This was the first time they met, and from this, Britten invited Ellis to play at the Alba Festival the following year. Now, as a harpist, I definitely have Osian Ellis and his friendship with Britten to thank for the reason why Britten included harp in many of his works, such as A Midsummer Night's Dream and The War Requiem, written between 1960 and 1968, because Britten actually had Osian Ellis in mind when he was writing these things. So Britten invited Ellis to collate a programme at the Alba Festival, and he suggested he commission a new work for the harp from any composer that he chooses. Naturally, Ellis chose Britten, and so the only work that Britten wrote for solo harp was composed. So Osian Ellis was a student at the Royal Academy of Music and also returned as a professor. He was the principal harp at the London Symphony Orchestra, and the second harp at that time was Karen Vaughan, who is the current head of harp at the Academy and is now my teacher. So when I was planning this presentation, I thought I must include a section dedicated to Osian Ellis because of this quite poignant full circle link of connections, which I definitely do feel linked to. Sadly, Osian Ellis passed away earlier this year, but I recently discovered that we actually share a birthday, so I think it really was meant to be that I am a harpist. Anyway, so this movement is a fugue, and Ellis described it as being funny and to think about it like a joke. So it hopefully makes a nice contrast with the sad John Thomas piece from earlier, so I hope you enjoy it. Just changing my microphone. Thank you very much. David, would you like me to finish my programme?
Yes, please finish your programme, Anna. Thank you.
So to finish, I'm going to play The Gaeliod Gwyneth Gwyn by, The Gaeliod Gwyneth Gwyn, which means Watching the White Wheat, which is a traditional 18th century Welsh love song, and it's arranged for harp by John Thomas. So this describes a tragic love affair between two people from different classes, and although it's a sad story, this is definitely a beautiful melody in which it gets more and more embellished. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. And we'll now move on to the next part of our meeting. We may be hearing from you later. It depends on the questions that get asked. But I'd like now to bring Ridian back online because I'm hoping that we will have reflections from Ridian on being Welsh and in London. There is an experience of coming from many places, but particularly my own experience is related to coming from Wales to England and from outside England into London, and the different worlds which we experience and the relationships that we share and the experiences we bring with us that helps the community survive in its new territory. The London Welsh Centre was an expression of that, opened in the 1930s by Lloyd George. But there are many other ways of expressing it. Ridian, would you care to start our reflections?
Thank you, President David. It's an interesting thing that people from outside London, and most of us in London are from outside London, curiously enough, always seem to gravitate to the part of the city that is closest to their origins. So it used to be said that why are there so many Irish in Camden Town? And the answer was it was as far as an Irishman could go from Euston Station carrying 2 heavy suitcases. And similarly, the Welsh tend to congregate in the west, where we can be out on what used to be the Oxford Road. And where I live in Ealing is right on that road. And in fact, in the 18th century, we had a very distinguished Welsh poet who was a curate in Northolt Church. And so there is a long tradition of Welsh people in the west of London. My rugby club, Ealing, actually plays on a ground which was the rest home for the Great Western Railway dray horses when they'd been walking around the streets of London for many, many hours every day. Once a month, they would be given some days off and they'd be taken to Ealing and put out to pasture in the sunshine. And of course, the really nice thing about that is both my grandfathers worked for God's wonderful railway. So when I go to my rugby club, I can feel that sense of home which we Welsh people have. We call it hiraeth. It is a longing for the country we come from. And why do we long for it? It's partly because of our musical traditions. So it's wonderful to hear Anna today. There is a Welsh poet who wrote, "To be born Welsh is to be born privileged, not with a silver spoon in your mouth, but music in your heart and poetry in your soul." What do you think about that, Anna?
Yes, definitely. So true.
But there are, of course, some negative aspects to this soulfulness, and that is we do melancholy rather well. I personally am not a very good singer. Well, that's not quite true. My wife, who is a musician, says I have a very good voice, but I can't hold a tune. So I'm all right in a choir, which is usually in a rugby match in Cardiff. I can sing in Welsh very powerfully and very tunefully, but it is a problem. There was a more negative modern Welsh poet called R.S. Thomas, who wrote, "There is no present in Wales and no future. There is only the past, brittle with relics, wind-bitten towers and castles with sham ghosts, mouldering quarries and mines, and an impotent people, sick with inbreeding, worrying the carcass of an old song." So that's the negative view of the Welsh. But perhaps there are people who'd like to have their own views on their experience of the Welsh amongst our members. You want
there must be somebody. There must be somebody who's got experience of the Welsh amongst our members. There might even be Welsh people amongst those on the call. And feel free, if you have something to observe, don't hang back. I'm not looking at anybody, Alan, but you know, anybody wearing a Welsh rugby shirt is expected to contribute.
Can't believe no one's.
You need to unmute. You need to unmute, Alan, if you're going to say something.
Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
Yep, you are indeed. Yep, we can. Yes.
Well, it's I remember coming up from Wales to work, and I've been studying in Cardiff. I came up as a social worker, and then found London Welsh Rugby Club, and also the London Welsh Centre, and that was a godsend, you know. I've continued to go to London Welsh and other rugby grounds, of course. I've carried on singing in the bar, and also I sing in Hidden Voices in Crystal Palace. But it's been a marvellous experience. The Welsh coming together on Saturday was a lovely experience.
Well, Saturday was very definitely one of the great days. I can remember seeing Gavin Henson in 2007 with the famous kick that won the game, 13-9, and Saturday was absolutely nail-biting. Alan, I played and coached at London Welsh, and I'm still very much involved in rugby, but now mainly with Ealing and Middlesex rather than London Welsh itself. But I have certainly spent my time on those fields as player and coach in Old Deer Park. And indeed, I was the villain in the mini section pantomime on one occasion.
Oh no, you wasn't.
Oh yes, I was. I was the evil Mr. Murdoch, who was going to take over the ground, take away the opportunity to play rugby from the boys and girls, and actually turn it into a print work so he could make more money. And I was dressed up in an Australian outfit because one of the other coaches was Australian. And every so often I had to come on and go, ah, ha, 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 ha. And of course, all the children would shout and cry and so on. But I did get rescued in the end. The Australian was actually a BBC writer, and he wrote fantastic script. And in the end, I was converted to being nice and leaving the rugby players well alone by kissing the most beautiful woman in the room. It was a very pleasant experience.
Brilliant.
David, Mac would like to say something about Wales.
Brilliant.
No, hang on, Mac is next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mac.
Well, basically, the Welsh are brilliant people. I remember going on a holiday trip. With a friend of mine who's sort of like a presenter on the BBC radio. We went on a short trip. We stayed with them in one of the Queen's lodges up in Cheshire. It was brilliant. We were lucky because, as you all know, Wales does have a high sort of rainfall. So it was summer period. Went with my wife and my young children at the time, young boys. It was one, you know, we had such a good time. The people we bumped into, the Welsh sort of landscape, just everything about it. And generally speaking, my own experience, the many Welsh people I've met over the years have been very pleasant people to deal with and interact with. So yeah, well done to you guys for the rugby win and everything else.
We don't expect to be unanimous for you on this call, though.
Yeah, well, I must confess that my sport is mainly football. However, when there is big international games, you know, I do sort of tap in. Obviously, you know, no one wants to see England lose, but no,
Could I ask Anna, we're talking about sport here. Now, normally the background in Wales would be the community chapel, the choirs, and rugby. But when you came to London, Anna, did you attach yourself to any groups that represented any of those, or was the Royal Academy of Music all you needed for your social life and comforts in town?
I think coming to the Academy, there's definitely a Welsh community within the Academy, and it's really nice to, it just kind of happened naturally because we obviously all have so much in common, and it definitely, you can really see the Welsh community most prominently in the evenings in the bar when there is the rugby on, because it does get very competitive. But in first year, I did join the Cor Llundain, which is the Welsh choir as part of the Welsh community in London, where just anyone could join just for your love of singing Welsh music, and that was also really, really fun as well. So yeah, it's nice to have the feeling of the Welsh community in London, definitely.
And David, Brian Summers would like to say something, and then Tom Swainland.
Hello, everybody. I spent my formative years in Bovingdon, in Penarth, which is 6 miles from Cardiff. I was evacuated there and lived there for about 6 years, interspersing my time there with an army camp in Bovingdon, where my late father was a sergeant major in the Royal Artillery under canvas. And the one thing is that whenever I return to Wales, and I often do, I slip back into a Welsh accent. And I have to tell my friends there and associates that I'm not taking the mickey. I can't help it. From the age of about 4 till 9, we only spoke with Welsh people. And of course, even though today in Penarth, Welsh is not spoken, in those days, they did do lessons in Welsh. So it was very interesting as well, and very, very enjoyable.
Yeah. And Tom Swainland.
Hello, Ridian and all. Yeah, I've got a great affinity with Wales. I moved a factory from Barking to Ammanford many years ago. I found it rather difficult at first to understand why they didn't drink in pubs on Sundays. But I soon found out that they compensated it by going to the rugby club, and we had plenty to drink at all the rugby clubs on Sundays. So that was the first kind of problem that we got over. And eating lava bread, which with their breakfast was a bit odd. I think it was with bacon and it's seaweed, I believe. Yeah. But again, getting away from English breakfast, the Welsh breakfast was really quite nice. And I had the good fortune of working with, I was in my early 30s with a number of men from the London area going down there. And we had such great time with all the Welsh people in the pubs in Llandybie and Llandinlo, and it was beautiful. It was a lovely country. The Gower was fantastic, and they had a dog there called Jack, I think it is, Swansea Jack. And Swansea Jack, I was once in a pub, and there was Ken Gardner, who was an ex-heavyweight champion who comes from Cardiff. He was a Welshman, and he was the landlord, and there was a load of boxers in the pub, all reminiscing, and then I was with a chap that was from London. He said they call the people from Swansea Jacks, and I said, well, yeah, I said it's probably been Jack the Ledge, you know, it's similar to what we say. So of course this chap, who was pretty big chap, he also shouted out to all the boxers in there. He said, cheers all your Swansea Jacks. It went absolutely quiet because it was an insult, because they were calling him a dog. So, but we learned a great amount there, and singing with the Welsh and haircuts in pubs, and it was wonderful time. And I like many people, when I hear the Welsh accent, I kind of really got a closeness of whoever I was speaking to on the phone, etc. So, but anyway, wonderful country, wonderful people, and congratulations for last Saturday.
Thank you.
Karen. Carry on too much.
Karen Bourne, next,
Sorry.
please.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to follow on from what Anna said. We are very welcoming to Welsh people in the academy, and we usually have a few Welsh harp students. And actually the two pieces that Anna played by John Thomas, he was actually professor at the Royal Academy of Music, and he was the first royal harpist. He was Queen Victoria's harpist. And that tradition was set up again when Catherine Finch became official harpist to the Prince of Wales. So we love the Welsh. Actually, my father was born in Rhyl, but I'm sorry to say for you rugby people that he ended up playing for England. So yes, it depends on who you support. And I actually married a Welshman. So I sort of made myself scarce on rugby days because, you know, we were cheering for opposite sides.
That might be a good opportunity, Anna. Do you think you could play one more piece just for the benefit of those that would enjoy it, the national anthem, perhaps?
Yes, of course.
We'll give you a moment to set up, but that I think would be a good way of you know, and ending the Welsh element, if you like. Vidian, do you have anything to add or to comment?
Our anthem genedlaethol would be wonderful if we could have that. I will let the tears course down my cheeks and think I was in the Millennium Stadium, as it used to be Principality Stadium, as it now is under the new sponsorship.
Ridian, can I? Ridian, can I
Alan.
just one thing, David? I'm told, Ridian, to make your day, that using the COVID rules, the Cardiff police have fined the England rugby team for making a pointless trip to Wales.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
And Harry, Harry's gone. He was going to say something.
I'm here. Sorry. I don't know whether I missed the spot, but just a brief almoner's report. Is that all right with you, President?
Yes, could you leave till after the next piece?
Yeah,
Harry?
as long as you know I've got it and I am here, okay?
No, thanks, yeah.
Thank you.
I was aware, yeah. Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, and thank you for our choristers as well. The chorister on mute was a bit disappointing, but I think we could lip read Iridian, so thank you for that. If I could move on, Tim, in the absence of Ivor, would you be able to say a word or two?
I could say a word or two. President David, first of all, happy St. David's Day to you and to everybody else. Ridian, I've been asked as a backup to thank you very much for your reflections. Absolutely fascinating. I have absolutely no idea what happened on Saturday. I was watching the golf all weekend, and I don't remember a Welshman winning golf, so I have no idea what that's all about. I love the way you read that poem about the negative side of Wales, and that inspired everybody else to come forward with positive things about Wales. So that worked very well indeed. Brian Summers, where are you, Brian? I had no idea you were brought up in Wales. Can you say anything in the Welsh language, Brian? There's a challenge for you.
I can say Croeso I Gwymru. Welcome to Wales.
Well done, well done, well done. Brilliant, Brian. Okay, so thank you very much, Ridian, for that, those reflections. Anna, thank you so much. It was really nice that you actually explained a little bit about you and explained a little bit about the songs you were going to play rather than just launching into the songs. It was really, really interesting. I think this must be one of the enormous benefits of Zoom, the fact that you didn't have to carry that harp all the way to the Chesterfield Hotel in London to play for us. And the other issue with harp music, if that's the right term, is that quite often it's playing as background music. And I always find when it's playing as background music, nobody can ever hear it, and it always goes to waste. So it was really nice to have you there today so that everybody could focus on you and that amazing music. So thank you very much for doing that, Anna. President David.
Thank you so much, Tim, for doing that vote of thanks. Now I'm coming towards the end of our meeting. Our next meeting, I would like past President Varsi Daniels to tell us about. This is next Monday. Varsi, would you just, and Varsi is in the chair, so Varsi, tell us about next Monday.
Thank you, President David. Yes, next week we have the International Women's Day, which is celebrated throughout the world. And we have some very interesting speakers next week, 4 very high-profile speakers. And I hope you will come and listen to them and ask your questions. It's a very important anniversary as well. And you have all the details on the newsletter. Please read. If you want to bring your friends, please let Clive know. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Varsi. Now, if that brings me back to our almoner to update us on our members of concern. Harry.
Thank you, President. And first of all, to all the Welsh people, happy St. David's Day, and I hope you have a really good day. Now, briefly, I've spoken to Giovanni today. He's one of our very more senior members, and I'm very pleased to report he is well. Tells me he's busy clearing up and doing all sorts of things, and that he might even do my painting soon. But he sounded good, and really that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Which just brings us to our closing time of 2 o'clock. And so I think if Clive is prepared to leave the links open, we may be able to chat a little bit after we've finished the meeting.
Yes, I'm happy to leave it open, David.
Thank you, Clive. The final toast of our meeting is to Rotary and Peace the world over. So would you pick up a vessel and toast? Thank you for the mug, Ridian. We should have given everybody one of those. Toast to Rotary and Peace the world over. Rotary and Peace the world over. The world over.
See your name coming up. I know, it's so annoying, isn't it?
And with that, I will wave my Welsh lady again and close the meeting. It's not as good as my normal sonorous bell, but The meeting is now closed. Thank you, everybody who's joined us. It has been, for me at least, most enjoyable.